There's one steak on a Texas steer that almost never made it to the display case. Just one per animal, a pound and a half of loose muscle hanging off the diaphragm. And for most of a century, the men behind the counter cut it free and carried it home in butcher paper. Customers never saw it. But that steak is only the front door, because the deeper you go into a Texas meat market, the stranger the knowledge gets. And waiting at the back is a secret that rewrites the story of Texas barbecue. To understand why a butcher would hide meat from his own customers, you have to understand what a Texas meat market actually was. Southside Market opened in Elgin in 1882. Kreutz Market started selling smoked meat in Lockhart around 1900. These were butcher shops run by German and Czech immigrants, and in the days before reliable refrigeration, beef that hadn't sold by Saturday was a problem with a deadline attached. So they smoked it. Post oak, low heat, hours of patience, because smoke bought time and turned tough cuts tender enough to sell to the farmhands and cotton pickers who could never afford a steak. Kreutz will still hand you meat on butcher paper and expect your fingers to do the rest, an old habit from the days when the dining room was the back of a grocery store. Central Texas barbecue was built out of a butcher's leftovers, which raises the question this whole story hangs on. If the leftovers became world famous, what did the butchers keep for themselves? Start with the steak from the opening. In the trade, it's called the hanger, or the hanging tender, and in the old shops, it carried a more honest name, the butcher's steak. It hangs off the underside of the diaphragm near the kidneys, and it does almost no work during the animal's life, which is exactly what you want, because a lazy muscle is a tender one. The grain runs loose and open, and the flavor is concentrated in a way a ribeye can't touch, closer to what beef tastes like in your memory than on your plate. There is just one problem, and it's the reason you never saw it. The thing is ugly, dark, ragged, split down the middle by a band of sinew that has to be filleted out by hand, and nobody walking in for a Sunday roast was going to pay for that, so the butcher didn't offer it. He boned it out, took it home, and fed his family the best eating steak on the animal, while the customers paid premium prices for the pretty ones. French butchers were running the same quiet racket with the same cut, and over there it's called anglet. Then, somewhere in the last 20 years, chefs started talking, and today, hanger steak shows up on menus at prices the old countermen would have found hilarious. The secret got out. The next one mostly hasn't. Ask a supermarket for beef ribs and watch what you get. Usually it's back ribs, the bones peeled off a ribeye roast with barely a scrap of meat left on them because the valuable muscle went to the steaks. Sometimes it's chuck short ribs, cut small, decent for braising. What you will almost never get is the cut that made Louis Muller Barbecue in Taylor a place of pilgrimage, the beef plate rib. It comes off the lower belly of the steer, 3 enormous bones to a slab, and a single bone can carry close to 2 pounds of meat, so rich and so shot through with fat that pit masters describe it as brisket on a stick. In the trade, it doesn't even have a romantic name, just a warehouse number on an order sheet, and that's the tell. To a packer, it's an industrial item. To a butcher, it's the difference between a decent Saturday and a legendary one. And knowing which rib is which, plate against chuck against back, count the bones. Read the curve of the slab is exactly the kind of thing that never gets printed on a label. Order beef ribs blind and you're gambling. Ask for plate ribs by name and somewhere behind the counter, an eyebrow goes up. Now you're speaking the language. Even the most famous cut in Texas has a secret compartment. A whole packer brisket is not one muscle. It's 2 stacked on top of each other with a seam of fat between them, and they could hardly be more different. The flat is the one you know, the lean rectangle the supermarket slices for photographs. The point sits above it, thicker, wilder, webbed with fat all the way through. And when a brisket comes off the pit after 12 hours, the flat is good. But the point is, the reason grown pit masters stand at the cutting block, eating with their fingers before service starts. Insiders order it with one word: moist. Say lean at the counter and you get the flat, tidy, and photogenic. Say moist and the knife moves to the other end, and what lands on your tray barely survives the slicing, because at that fat level it holds together out of politeness. Old-timers still argue over the word decal, which strictly means the fat and rib meat trimmed off the underside, though half the pit rooms in Texas use it for the point anyway. The vocabulary is messy. The knowledge underneath it is not. Same brisket, two different meals, and the man with the knife decides which one you get. Right next door to the brisket sits a cut plenty of Texans have only ever eaten in New York. The navel comes off the belly plate, and it's the muscle deli pastrami is traditionally built on. The handful of pit masters who bothered smoking it like a brisket report something almost unfair: a silkier, fattier slab that's harder to dry out and cheaper to buy. On the rare occasion you can find one at all, because the packers route nearly all of it to bacon programs and delis. A real butcher can pull you one. A supermarket usually can't. That gap between can and can is where this whole story's heading, because so far every secret has at least looked like a steak. In South Texas, the knowledge runs further than that. Drive down into the Rio Grande Valley on a Sunday morning and you'll find people lining up before dawn for Barbacoa de Cabeza. And the cabeza part means exactly what you think it means: the head. The tradition traces back to the vaquero era, when ranch workers were often given the parts of the animal the ranch didn't sell, and they turned that arrangement into one of the great slow-cooked dishes on the continent. The old method is a pit dug into the earth and filled with mesquite coals, the head wrapped tight, lowered in, buried, and left overnight, while the ground itself does the cooking. By most accounts, Vera's Backyard Bar BQ in Brownsville is the last place in Texas still permitted to cook it in the ground, weekends only. And when that pit opens in the dark, the steam that rolls out smells like mesquite smoke and rendered beef and wet earth all at once. The prize inside is the cachet, the cheek, a muscle that worked every single day of the animal's life chewing, which by the logic of the hanger steak should be nearly inedible. After 12 hours underground, it turns into something you can spread with a spoon. That's the trade the whole craft is built on: time against toughness. And the people who understood it first were the ones standing closest to the animal. Which brings us to the last secret, and it's bigger than all the others, because it hides in plain sight inside the most famous cut Texas has. Everyone knows brisket is king. The 4-hour lines in Austin, the overnight cooks, an entire mythology balanced on one slab of beef. The old butchers know something those lines mostly don't. Brisket wasn't the original king. Walk into Croyt's Market in Lockhart today, and you can still order the cut that was the shoulder clod, a massive muscle group off the front shoulder that can weigh 15 to 20 pounds, leaner than brisket, sliced thin, and served that way in Lockhart for more than a century. In the early markets, the pits held whatever the weak left behind. Clod, forequarter, whatever hadn't moved. Brisket was one option among many. Then, in the 1960s and 70s, the shipping side of the beef business rewrote the menu. The big packing companies stopped sending whole sides of beef to butchers and started breaking carcasses down at the plant, sealing the pieces in vacuum bags and shipping them out in boxes. Boxed beef. Suddenly a pit master could order nothing but briskets, everyone roughly the same size every single week, and cheaper per pound than nearly any other large cut on the truck, because back then hardly anybody else wanted them. The signature dish of Texas, the cut people now cross oceans to eat, got its crown for the least romantic reason imaginable. It was the cheapest thing in the box. Butchers watched it happen in real time. The clod faded almost everywhere, the brisket lines grew, and one of the only places the older tradition survived, is the same market in Lockhart, still slicing shoulder clod for customers who mostly have no idea they're eating the original. Here's the part that should worry you. The counters themselves are disappearing. Supermarket beef now arrives exactly the way that Revolution designed it to. Pre-broken, vacuum-sealed, boxed, which means the person stocking the case may never have seen where a hanger steak lives because nobody in that building has broken down a whole animal in years. The knowledge in this story used to be handed across a counter with your change. Now it retires one person at a time. If you want to see what's being lost, look at Tootsie Tominets. She started cutting meat at City Meat Market in Giddings back in the 1960s and spent decades at the Block and the Pit. And in 2008, when Texas Monthly went hunting for the best barbecue in the state, the #1 spot went to Snow's BBQ in Lexington, a place open only on Saturday mornings, where Tootsie, then in her 70s, was shoveling coals before sunrise. By every account that's gone looking, she was still working the pits well into her 80s. The food world calls her a pit master. The title she earned first was butcher, and everything people now line up for at 4 in the morning grew out of that first job. So the next time you're standing at a meat counter, understand what's actually across from you, not a display case. A filing system holding more than 140 years of judgment that was never written down. That knowledge survived the leftover years, and it survived boxed beef. It may not survive the last generation that learned it with a knife in their hand, and when the person who knows where the hanger hides finally hangs up their apron, does all of it just go? If you've got a butcher who still saves the good stuff, or you've eaten barbacoa straight from the ground, I'm curious what you found, so tell me in the comments. And stick around, because the sausage those German markets built, the rings from Elgin that started everything, that story's next. Word count, 1,990.